That day, the man who came to court thought Judge Caprio was just an ordinary judge. He had no idea he was about to face one of the most respected judicial minds in America, someone who would teach him a lesson he'd never forget. What started as a routine traffic violation hearing was about to become the most viral courtroom moment of the year. "Your Honor, this is complete garbage." The furious driver's voice echoed through the Providence Municipal Court, his face red with anger as he slammed his hand on the defendant's table. "This whole system is rigged. You judges are all the same, just money-hungry bureaucrats." The entire courtroom fell silent. Court officers instinctively moved closer. The gallery of spectators held their breath. Nobody had ever seen someone explode like this in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. But what happened next would shock everyone present and millions who would watch online. Judge Caprio didn't bang his gavel. He didn't call for order. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and did something that nobody expected. His response would not only defuse a volatile situation but would demonstrate exactly why he's considered one of America's greatest judges. But nobody in that courtroom knew that this angry driver was about to receive the lesson of his lifetime. If you want to see how a master of human psychology handles the most difficult people, make sure you're subscribed because what you're about to witness will change how you think about leadership forever. The man standing before Judge Caprio that Tuesday morning was Michael Romano, a 45-year-old construction worker from Federal Hill. He'd been caught running a red light on Westminster Street, and what should have been a simple $150 fine had escalated into something much bigger. Romano had been fighting this ticket for 3 months, convinced he was being persecuted by the system. This wasn't Romano's first time in traffic court. He'd been here twice before for speeding violations, and each time he'd left feeling frustrated and unheard. Today was supposed to be different. Today he'd decided he was going to speak his mind no matter what happened. Judge Caprio had been on the bench for over 3 decades. In that time, he'd seen every type of defendant imaginable. The remorseful, the defiant, the confused, and the angry. But Romano's outburst was particularly venomous, filled with personal attacks and conspiracy theories about corrupt judges and money-grabbing municipalities. "You don't know anything about my life," Romano continued shouting, pointing an accusatory finger at the judge. "You sit up there in your fancy robe, making decisions about people you don't understand. This fine could feed my family for a week." The court officers exchanged glances. Protocol dictated they should intervene, possibly even arrest Romano for contempt of court. The gallery murmured nervously. Some spectators started recording with their phones, sensing something explosive was about to happen. But Judge Caprio raised his hand slightly, a subtle signal for everyone to wait. "Mr. Romano," the judge said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "you're absolutely right." The 3 words that followed would stun everyone in the courtroom and teach Romano something about leadership he never expected. Romano stopped mid-sentence, his mouth still open, confusion replacing anger on his face. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the old building's heating system humming. Even the court reporter stopped typing, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "I said you're right," Judge Caprio repeated, his voice still calm and measured. "I don't know anything about your life. I don't know if you have children to feed, bills to pay, or struggles I've never faced. And you know what? That's exactly why I need to listen to you." Romano blinked, completely disarmed. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd come prepared for a fight, ready to battle against another uncaring judge. But instead, he found someone who seemed genuinely interested in understanding his situation. "Tell me about your family, Mr. Romano," Judge Caprio continued, leaning forward slightly. "Tell me what's really going on that makes this fine such a burden." For the first time since entering the courtroom, Romano's shoulders relaxed. The fury in his eyes began to fade, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. Here was a judge who actually wanted to hear his story. I've got 3 kids, Your Honor," Romano began, his voice now barely audible. "My wife lost her job 2 months ago. I'm working double shifts just to keep the lights on. This fine, it's not just money to me. It's groceries. It's my daughter's school supplies. Judge Caprio nodded thoughtfully. And the red light you ran? Romano looked down at his hands. I was rushing home from my second job. My youngest had a fever, and my wife was scared. I saw the light turning yellow, and I thought I could make it. I was wrong. But what Judge Caprio said next would prove why he's not just a judge, but a true leader who understands the human heart. Mr. Romano, Judge Caprio said, his voice filled with understanding rather than judgment. Do you think I've never made a mistake when I was worried about my family? The question hung in the air. Romano looked up, meeting the judge's eyes for the first time. When my son was in the hospital with pneumonia 30 years ago, Judge Caprio continued, I probably broke every traffic law in Rhode Island getting to see him. Fear makes us do things we wouldn't normally do. But you know what I learned that day? Romano shook his head, completely captivated now. I learned that our responsibilities don't stop just because we're scared. That red light you ran? It wasn't just a rule some bureaucrat made up to annoy you. It was there to protect other families, maybe other fathers rushing home to sick children. The courtroom was mesmerized. This wasn't the typical judicial lecture about following laws. This was something deeper, a conversation between two fathers, two human beings who understood the weight of responsibility. But here's what I also learned, Judge Caprio added, his voice warming. Sometimes good people make mistakes for good reasons. And when they do, justice isn't about punishment, it's about understanding and growth. Romano's eyes began to well up. The anger that had consumed him for months was melting away, replaced by something he hadn't felt in a long time. Respect for authority that was earned, not demanded. Your Honor, Romano started, but couldn't finish the sentence. Mr. Romano, I'm going to do something that might surprise you, Judge Caprio said, reaching for his gavel. I'm going to dismiss this ticket entirely. The gallery gasped. Court officers looked at each other in amazement. Romano's mouth fell open in disbelief. But, Judge Caprio continued, raising his finger, I want you to promise me something in return. What Romano promised next would create one of the most powerful moments in courtroom history. Anything, Your Honor, Romano said, his voice thick with emotion. Anything at all. I want you to promise me that you'll remember this feeling, Judge Caprio said. Not the anger you came in with, but this feeling right now. The feeling of being heard, understood, and given a second chance. Romano nodded vigorously, tears now flowing freely down his cheeks. And I want you to promise me that the next time you encounter someone in authority, a police officer, a teacher, anyone in a position of power, you'll remember that they're human too. That they might have families to worry about just like you do. I promise, Your Honor, Romano whispered. But most importantly, Judge Caprio added, his voice taking on the tone of a father giving advice to his son. I want you to promise me that you'll never let anger make your decisions for you again. That you'll remember that the person sitting across from you, whether it's a judge or anyone else, is fighting battles you know nothing about. Romano straightened up, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, he looked like a man who had found his dignity again. Your Honor, Romano said, his voice steady now. I came here ready to hate you. I thought you'd be just another judge who didn't care. But you've shown me what real leadership looks like. You've shown me that power doesn't have to corrupt, that authority can be used to heal instead of hurt. The gallery began to murmur in appreciation. Several spectators wiped tears from their eyes. Even the usually stoic court officers seemed moved by what they were witnessing. Mr. Romano, Judge Caprio said, standing up from his bench. You came here angry and I don't blame you. The world can be a harsh place, and sometimes it feels like nobody cares about our struggles. But I want you to know that there are people in positions of authority who do care, who do understand, and who want to help. He paused, looking directly at Romano with the kind of paternal warmth that had made him beloved by millions. You're a good man who made a mistake under difficult circumstances. That doesn't make you a criminal, it makes you human. And humans deserve compassion, not condemnation. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell because what happened next will restore your faith in the justice system. Romano approached the bench, and in an unprecedented move, Judge Caprio stepped down to meet him. They shook hands, and Romano said something that would later go viral around the world. "Your Honor, you didn't just dismiss my ticket today. You gave me back my faith in fairness. You showed me that there are still good people in power who remember what it's like to struggle." Judge Caprio smiled, the kind of warm, grandfatherly smile that had endeared him to millions of viewers worldwide. "Mr. Romano, power without compassion is tyranny, but compassion without wisdom is chaos. A good leader needs both." As Romano turned to leave, he stopped and faced the gallery. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the courtroom, "I came here today ready to fight a system I thought was against me. Instead, I found a judge who reminded me that the system is made up of people, and that people can choose to be kind." The gallery erupted in spontaneous applause. Court officers, who had seen thousands of cases over the years, admitted later that they had never witnessed anything quite like it. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. "Mr. Romano, before you go," the judge called out, "I want to give you something." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small card. "This is the number for the Family Assistance Program here in Providence. They help families going through tough times with things like utility bills and school supplies. I want you to call them." Romano's eyes widened. "Your Honor, I don't deserve." "Mr. Romano," Judge Caprio interrupted gently, "helping each other isn't about deserving, it's about caring. And this community cares about families like yours." But the biggest shock was still to come, and it would prove why Judge Caprio is more than just a judge. He's a true leader of his community. As Romano stood there, overwhelmed by the kindness he was receiving, Judge Caprio made an announcement that stunned everyone in the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," the judge said, addressing the gallery, "what we've witnessed here today is what happens when we choose understanding over judgment, compassion over condemnation. Mr. Romano came here angry, and he had every right to be. Life had been beating him down, and he was fighting back the only way he knew how." The judge paused, looking around the courtroom at the faces of the people who had witnessed this transformation. But anger, while understandable, is never the solution. The solution is what happened here today. Two people, from different worlds, finding common ground in their shared humanity. He turned back to Romano. "Mr. Romano, you taught me something today too. You reminded me why I became a judge in the first place, not to punish but to help. Not to look down on people, but to see them as they truly are, fellow human beings doing their best in difficult circumstances." Romano wiped his eyes, completely overwhelmed by the turn of events. "Judge Caprio, how can I ever thank you?" "You can thank me by paying it forward," the judge replied. "The next time you see someone who's angry, someone who's struggling, someone who feels like the world is against them, remember this moment. Remember that sometimes people just need to be heard, understood, and shown a little kindness." As Romano finally left the courtroom, he turned back one last time. "Your Honor, you didn't just change my day, you changed my life. Thank you for showing me what real leadership looks like." The video of this exchange, recorded by multiple spectators, would be viewed over 50 million times within a week. Comments poured in from around the world, praising Judge Caprio's handling of the situation and Romano's transformation from anger to gratitude. Share this video if you believe in the power of compassion to change lives, and comment below, what would you have done in Judge Caprio's position? But perhaps the most telling moment came 3 months later, when Romano returned to the courthouse, not as a defendant, but as a volunteer for the family assistance program Judge Caprio had told him about. "Judge Caprio didn't just dismiss my ticket," Romano told reporters that day. "He showed me that leadership isn't about having power over people. It's about using your power to lift people up. He could have thrown me in jail for contempt of court. Instead, he threw me a lifeline." The judge, when asked about the incident months later, simply said, "Michael Romano was never the problem. His anger was just pain looking for a way out. Once we addressed the pain, the anger disappeared. That's what real justice looks like, not punishment for its own sake, but healing for everyone involved. Today, Romano runs a support group for struggling families in Providence, inspired by the compassion he received in Judge Caprio's courtroom. He often tells people, "I learned that day that the best leaders aren't the ones who demand respect. They're the ones who earn it by showing respect to others first." Judge Caprio's approach that day demonstrated what true judicial leadership looks like. The wisdom to see beyond the surface anger to the human pain underneath, the courage to break with protocol when compassion demands it, and the understanding that real authority comes not from the power to punish, but from the ability to heal and restore human dignity. The incident became a teaching case in law schools across the country, not for its legal precedent, but for its demonstration of how compassion and wisdom can transform even the most volatile situations into opportunities for growth and understanding. As one legal scholar noted, Judge Caprio didn't just resolve a case that day. He demonstrated that the highest form of justice isn't about applying the law blindly, but about applying it with wisdom, understanding, and heart. That angry driver who came to court thinking he'd face just another ordinary judge instead encountered something extraordinary. A leader who understood that true power lies not in domination, but in the ability to see the humanity in everyone who stands before you, even in their angriest moments. The ripple effects of that single courtroom encounter continued long after the cameras stopped rolling. Within hours of the video being posted online, Judge Caprio's office was flooded with calls from people around the world who had been moved by what they witnessed. Many shared their own stories of anger, frustration, and how a single act of kindness had changed their perspective. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a behavioral psychologist at Brown University who studied the video, noted something remarkable. What Judge Caprio demonstrated that day was textbook emotional intelligence in action. He didn't just defuse a volatile situation. He transformed it into a teaching moment for everyone present. The psychological principles at work were fascinating to observe. When Romano exploded with anger, Judge Caprio's first instinct wasn't to match that energy with authority and dominance. Instead, he employed what psychologists call emotional aikido, redirecting the aggressive energy into something constructive. The moment Judge Caprio said, "You're absolutely right," he accomplished something remarkable. Dr. Martinez explained. He validated Romano's feelings without validating his behavior. That's a distinction most people in authority positions struggle to make. The video became required viewing in leadership courses at several universities. Professor James Chun at Harvard Business School used it to illustrate what he called authentic leadership in crisis moments. Most leaders, when faced with public criticism or aggression, resort to either defensive posturing or authoritarian shutdown, Professor Chun observed. Judge Caprio chose a third path, curiosity and empathy. He turned an adversarial moment into a collaborative one. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of the encounter was how Judge Caprio maintained his authority while showing vulnerability. When he shared his own story about rushing to the hospital when his son was sick, he demonstrated that effective leadership requires the courage to be human. Romano later described that moment as pivotal. When he told me about his own mistake, about being scared for his child, I realized he wasn't some untouchable judge on a pedestal. He was a father just like me. That's when my anger turned into respect. The incident also highlighted the broader issues facing America's justice system. Legal scholars noted that Judge Caprio's approach demonstrated how individual judicial philosophy can dramatically impact community relations and public trust in the legal system. This single interaction probably did more to build trust between the community and the courts than months of traditional outreach programs, noted retired Massachusetts Supreme Court Justice Patricia Williams. It showed that justice can be both firm and compassionate, authoritative and understanding. The Providence Municipal Court saw a measurable change in the months following the incident. Court clerks reported that defendants were more respectful, more willing to engage constructively with the process, and more likely to comply with court orders. The Romano incident had apparently created a new culture of mutual respect. People started coming to court with a different attitude, observed longtime court clerk Maria Santos. They'd heard about Judge Caprio's compassion, but they also understood that it came with expectations of respect and responsibility. Even other judges began adopting elements of Judge Caprio's approach. The Rhode Island Judicial Education Program invited him to conduct workshops on compassionate justice, which became some of the most attended sessions in the program's history. Judge Caprio himself remained characteristically humble about the attention. "I didn't do anything extraordinary that day," he insisted in interviews. "I just remembered that behind every case number is a human being with a story worth hearing." But Romano disagreed. In a letter he wrote to the Providence Journal 6 months after the incident, he described the encounter as life-changing. "Judge Caprio didn't just give me a second chance. He taught me how to give second chances to others. That's the mark of a true leader." Today, the Michael Romano story is told in law schools, business schools, and leadership seminars around the world. It serves as a powerful reminder that true authority comes not from the power to punish, but from the wisdom to understand, the courage to show compassion, and the strength to maintain dignity even in the face of disrespect. As Romano often tells audiences when he speaks about his experience, "I went to court that day ready for a fight. Judge Caprio gave me something better. He gave me a teacher, a lesson, and ultimately a better version of myself." The judge's response that day continues to inspire leaders in all fields to reconsider how they handle difficult people and challenging situations. It proved that sometimes the most powerful response to anger isn't authority or punishment. It's understanding, compassion, and the recognition that we're all human beings doing our best in difficult circumstances.